Okay, I think we can get started. So, hi everyone. My name is Rachel Ruback, and I work for the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative. I lead our North America work, but also am supporting our delegation to the World Conservation Congress. And I'm joined today by a number of colleagues from the Fossil Fuel Treaty and from WWF to discuss the motion um, that motion 42 on the fossil fuel treaty that will be discussed at the World Conservation Congress next week. Throughout this webinar, we'll spend a bit of time discussing the link between fossil fuels and biodiversity loss. We'll break down what motion 42 is, what it's asking for, and why it matters. And then we'll share tools to help IUCN members such as yourselves caucus and vote for the motion at the World Conservation Congress, and provide some communications assets that can be amplified ahead of the motion in the Congress. Really grateful to you all for taking the time to join us today. And with that, I will turn it over to Fernanda Carvalho from WWF, who will set the scene a bit on fossil fuels and nature and why WWF has been leading the efforts on Motion 42. Go ahead, Fernanda.
Okay, so first I need to share my screen. Let me check here. So, thank you for taking the time to be here. It's a pleasure and also kind of a challenge because I'm more focused on the climate agenda rather than biodiversity. But here we are with this amazing opportunity to bring this motion to the IUCN. So the title of the presentation is Fossil Fuel Phase Out as a Key Contribution to Halting and Reversing Biodiversity Loss. I'm the head of policy for climate and energy at WWF, Fernanda Carvalho, based in Brazil. And I will be at the IUCN Congress to discuss this motion. So I think that, I start with this picture of a graph that we adapted from the IPCC. The IPCC did this graph showing the impact of global warming on people from different ages. So people who were born in the 40s, when they get to 80 years old in 2020, there is already global warming of 1.5 to 2 degrees. But people who are born in 2020, when they get to 80 years old, if they get to 80 years old in 2100, there will be global warming of plus 5 degrees. And we did the same. This is WWF's intervention. We did the same for biodiversity. So animals and corals that were formed, for example, in the 1700s, in the scenery of global warming, actually in the very low warming future scenarios, which are very unlikely, most corals will disappear after 2050. Also, trees planted in 1870 will be severely affected by climate change. Whales, elephants, those are all species that will be impacted by a global warming future that we want to avoid. So the rationale for this motion, and I will start talking about it now, is of course something that's widely known, that there is a vicious cycle between climate change and biodiversity loss. Climate change causes biodiversity loss through temperature rise, extreme weather, and sea level rise that end in habitat disruption, and biodiversity loss also fuels climate change because it weakens natural carbon sinks that take CO2 from the atmosphere, creating more and more effects. So it's a vicious cycle. And of course, I mean, it connects very much to WWF's mission. Our mission is to stop the degradation of the planet's natural environment and build a future in which humans live in harmony with nature by conserving the world's biological diversity, ensuring that the use of renewable natural resources is sustainable, and promoting the reduction of pollution and wasteful consumption. So, to fulfill our mission, we think we need to break this vicious cycle of climate change and biodiversity loss fueling each other. So, some of the science that is behind this rationale and behind the motion is that fossil fuels are driving climate change and biodiversity loss, and science is unequivocal when they talk about it. The IPCC report from 2023 states very clearly that fossil fuels are the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, and the IPBES assessments on biodiversity and ecosystem service from 2019 states that climate change is a key driver of ecosystem collapse, the third among 5 drivers. The first one are, of course, land use change, and I think that, habitat destruction, but climate change is the third. And what is really also important about climate change is that it enhances, or it fuels, if you like, all the other drivers of biodiversity loss. So the world is still planning a fossil fuel expansion beyond what would be acceptable if we want to stay below 1.5. That would entail no new oil and gas fields, and that's not the reality that we see now. And of course, fossil fuels have direct and indirect impacts on biodiversity. So this will all be stated in a briefing that WWF is finalizing, but this is basically a summary or what the science says in a nutshell. And some impacts of fossil fuels on biodiversity, just to highlight a few. As I mentioned, some of the direct impacts are habitat destruction, pollution and noise disturbances during extraction and transportation, such as deforestation for infrastructure, also oil spills, damages from infrastructure, damage from drill cutting and drilling mud, and indirect impacts is contribution to sea level rise, habitat shifts, introduction of invasive species, altered precipitation patterns, extreme weather events becoming more frequent and intense, and of course, transforming and disturbing aquatic environments, and also social impacts on local human populations. For example, on fisheries, which are the basis of survival of some populations. So this is all very important and should be considered, and it's behind the motion, and that's why we are proposing this motion. So going to the motion a bit, the title of this motion is Addressing the Climate and Biodiversity Crisis Through Fossil Fuel Supply Side Measures and a Just Transition. And what it requests the IUCN to do is to develop an analysis to support the relevance of a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. And we think this is a very necessary, innovative, and disruptive initiatives. And my colleagues of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty will detail that, but it's an initiative that is complementary and supportive to the UNFCCC. We think the UNFCCC has, of course, the limitations to deliver on the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, of the fossil fuel phase out that we need so much, sorry. But so a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty would have an additional role, and we think it's a very important initiative that the IUCN has the opportunity to get behind. And we are also asking the IUCN to provide guidance on just transition pathways for fossil fuel dependent developing states. And there are asks for the IUCN to encourage states too, and the motion asks the IUCN to encourage states to address the gap in international governance on the fossil fuel supply by negotiating a fossil fuel treaty, and encouraging states again to declare a fossil-free zone in the Amazon. In this case, this ask is, of course, directed to Amazonian states. So this is the motion in a nutshell. It is available, the text is available in the IUCN website. We could also share the text with the ones interested, and we'll be discussing the language and this text at the IUCN Congress. The co-sponsors of the motion are, of course, the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative, not a member of the IUCN, so that's why I singled it out, but it is a key partner of the motion and the rationale and what we are proposing. Of course, we have the Natural Resources Defense Council, the Climate Action Network Tanzania, Conflict and Environment Observatory from the UK, Wildlife Conservation Trust from India, Exploralis from Tunisia, and the Center for Biological Diversity from the US. Svenska Nature Fund, I think. I'm not going to dare to pronounce this, but from Sweden, Bangladesh Environmental Lawyers Association, our WWF Brazil office, and the association Sotzil from Guatemala, and WWF International is the main sponsor. We are very happy to be in a very diverse and global group of organizations with strong support from the global south. This is important. So this is what the motion is about. And the process is now the next step is going to the Congress and participating in a contact group there where we'll be able to hear from others and discuss and try to finalize the motion and try to get agreement to on the language of a motion that would be suitable for all, but very much highlighting the importance of this discussion of a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. So see you there, or see most of you there. And towards the end already of my presentation, so those are the key takeaways that I think are important from this presentation, this motion, and this discussion. I think I hope I made it clear that fossil fuel phase out is essential to biodiversity protection. This is one of the main causes of climate change. And of course, climate change is fueling the biodiversity crisis. And the biodiversity crisis is also affecting our ability to fight and to adapt to climate change. So that's the rationale behind the motion. We also found a very recent article that mentions that despite now climate change being among the 5 key drivers of biodiversity, there is a very high chance that climate change will be the top driver of biodiversity loss by mid-century. So that's another reason why we should be concerned about, you know, phasing out fossil fuels as a key contribution to conserving biodiversity. Fossil fuel supply side action is overdue. It's threatening a 1.5 future, which becomes harder and harder each day. And as we know, every degree or every cent of a degree makes a difference. And of course, that this motion 42, is a crucial step for aligning the climate and biodiversity agendas. So, as you know, the discussion on synergies is gaining momentum in the CBD and also in the UNFCCC. And what I just showed you is an example of a very negative synergy, something that we don't want to see and we want to avoid, that those crises that, you know, are twin crises keep fueling each other, and we need to fight them. And of course, this is a key opportunity for IUCN engagement in addressing a root cause of biodiversity loss, that's climate change, that has as its main cause fossil fuels. So we think this is a unique opportunity for IUCN to play a contribution, and we really expect this motion to be approved and to be supported at the Congress, and we are kindly asking for your support to this motion. So I think I'm done now, and over to you, Rachel. I hope that was clear despite some confusion, but that's what we are planning to do, and we are very happy to be supporting this motion, and we'll be even happier if it gets approved by the Congress. Over.
Yeah, thank you so much, Fernanda, for that presentation. And yeah, as you said, there's so many ways in which climate change and fossil fuels directly are threatening biodiversity. And so we will make sure to share with all of the participants on this webinar the brief on fossil fuels and biodiversity that Fernanda mentioned her team is working on putting together. I did drop the link to the motion text into the chat, and there will be an opportunity for Q&A at the end of this webinar. So if you have any questions, please feel free to keep putting them into the Q&A box and we will address them at the end. Now, before we go into our next speaker, the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty proposal has really been championed by the Pacific Island nations. And so we have a brief video from Minister for Climate Change, Adaptation, Energy, Environment, Meteorology, Geohazards, and Disaster Management, what a long title, Minister Ralph Regavanu from Vanuatu, who has recorded a brief video sharing why Vanuatu is supporting this motion. Can you see this?
This October, we have an historic opportunity. For the first time, IUCN members will vote on a motion that directly addresses fossil fuels, the root driver of both the climate and biodiversity crises. The science is clear. Burning coal, oil, and gas causes over 64% of global carbon emissions, fueling the climate disasters that destroy ecosystems and threaten lives. Fossil fuels are responsible for more than half of ocean acidification, threatening reefs and fisheries our communities rely on. And yet fossil fuels are not even mentioned in the Paris Agreement or any major international climate treaty. Motion 42 closes this gap and gives the IUCN a mandate to act, from guiding just transition pathways to exploring fossil fuel-free zones in biodiversity hotspots like the Amazon and the Pacific. Vanuatu knows what is at stake. Our islands are on the front line of this crisis. That is why we became the first country to call for a global fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty to phase out fossil fuels fairly and support a just transition. With the recent ICJ advisory opinion, it is now clear states have legal obligations to prevent climate harm. This is our chance to act together. Phasing out fossil fuels could reduce extinction risks by 75% and free up billions for biodiversity protection. By supporting Motion 42, we can show that the conservation movement is ready to confront the fossil fuel crisis head on. So I call on all IUCN members to stand with us. Stand with the Pacific, support Motion 42, and vote yes for a fossil fuel treaty for nature. Together we can protect biodiversity, deliver climate justice, and secure a livable future for all. Thank you.
Yeah, the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty team has been working closely with the Pacific Islands and a number of other countries to advance this proposal, and are very grateful for the leadership of folks like Minister Ralph, who will be one of the key speakers at the IUCN World Conservation Congress in October, which today's October. Okay, so yeah, in a few weeks, Minister Ralph will be at the World Conservation Congress. And so with that, I want to turn it over to my colleague Harjeet Singh, who will be able to share a bit more about the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty proposal itself and why the IUCN motion is so critical for our campaign to win a fossil fuel treaty. Harjeet.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Hi, everybody. Thank you all for joining this important conversation. I'm Harjeet Singh, Strategic Advisor to the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative based in India. I must thank Fernanda for doing an incredible job in explaining the context and the motion, and WWF for leading this motion, and all our co-sponsors who have played an important role in highlighting this particular issue. And of course, you all heard the powerful words from the Minister Ralph Regavanu, who emphasized how important it is to have this motion passed. And I must mention that if you look at the history, past treaty efforts have demonstrated that you need support from a variety of multilateral institutions and from the public. And particularly when we talk about IUCN, which has played a critical role and has a potential to really shift the diplomatic discourse and also help create public pressure to get the treaty negotiated. While we want IUCN to support this motion, and we already have secured European Parliament, the World Health Organization, who have actively proposed and engaged with the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty campaign. And we already have 17 nation states who are leading the call for this treaty. Alongside, we have 137 cities and subnationals. We have 10 indigenous nations. We have 4,000 civil society organizations. We also have 1 million individuals who now endorse this call. We also have 800 parliamentarians who have been part of an initiative calling for a fossil fuel free future and supporting the idea of this new global framework that is required. alongside, we also have 3,000 plus scientists, academics, and researchers, and 600 plus faith institutions. So you can see how we have a wide range of support, a ground up support that we have been able to create as part of the public opinion. And we have also got 25 banks who are part of a global alliance for banking on values. So from all walks of life, we are now seeing support coming for the treaty initiative. And this is the moment where we would like to see more multilateral support so that we can have more governments around the world supporting it. And as Fernanda mentioned, by passing Motion 42, which is about addressing both climate and the biodiversity crisis, and we are looking at fossil fuel and the supply side measures which have not been discussed as much, and then having this motion is going to really help us in our pathway towards a just transition. And IUCN would become the first environmental focused multilateral body to join the ranks, as I mentioned, of the European Parliament and the WHO. And definitely it's going to be a huge step in the journey towards securing a negotiating mandate for a fossil fuel treaty. As we are preparing for the legal pathway to have a treaty which complements the Paris Agreement. And I must also mention, and we are very pleased to see Colombia taking leadership, working closely with countries like Vanuatu and others to organize the first international conference on fossil fuel phase out next year in April. So all these things are adding to the momentum, and we would like IUCN to join this campaign. And needless to say, IUCN plays such an important role globally in setting those norms. So such endorsement would also demonstrate the urgent necessity to pursue and align both fossil fuel phase out and nature protection measures, as Fernanda also highlighted. And we are at a very critical point where we see climate overshoot, and this is the moment to protect climate as well as biodiversity. A few lines on ICJ, the historic decision, and Minister Ralph already alluded to that. It is quite significant and historic the way ICJ advisory opinion has mentioned and underlined the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold, which is the world agreed primary temperature goal, and how the continued fossil fuel production, licensing, and subsidies may now be seen as an internationally wrongful act. And this is quite historic, the way ICJ holds the states to account, but also the private sector, which is going ahead and with the extraction and use of fossil fuels. So to address this threat, the court particularly suggests that there need to be a cooperation between states, which is going to be the very foundation of any meaningful international efforts with respect to climate change. And it also mentions that how treaties and their coordinated forms of implementation are a principal expression of this cooperation. So we know that Paris Agreement does not really address the issue of fossil fuels, and that's how this particular treaty that complements the Paris Agreement and helps achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement becomes extremely important to achieve that goal and address the gaps that exist in the global policy framework. And I'm not going to repeat, but it's really important. And for us also, it's an opportunity to bring the issues of climate and biodiversity together, which we know are inextricably linked and are going to help us preventing the overshoot of 1.5 degree threshold. So this is an effort from everybody, and of course with the leadership of WWF and other organizations to call for this treaty, and particularly in the IUCN process. And this is going to help us hold governments accountable to their international legal obligations in accordance with the ICJ advisory opinion, as well as Paris Agreement and many other international agreements, by demanding a fossil fuel treaty that also strengthens the goals of Paris Agreement. I'm going to stop here, and you'll see more information coming from our friends. So I'll hand over back to Rachel.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Harjeet. Yeah, as mentioned before, there will be a Q&A section at the end of this, so please feel free to write any additional questions you might have about the fossil fuel treaty proposal, but really grateful for that very clear layout of what it is that we are hoping to achieve in the international climate governance space by creating a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, and why IUCN is a really critical, why this motion is a really critical stepping stone on the way to winning an actual fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. So yes, please feel free to put any additional questions that you have into the chat. With that, I am going to share another video recorded by the president of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative, Kumi Naidu, who will share a bit more about the significance of this motion.
Dear friends, let's be brutally honest. For decades, we have known that fossil fuels are killing our climate, poisoning our oceans, and driving countless species to extinction. And yet, the world has continued to pour fuel on the fire. This is not ignorance, this is betrayal. Every stage of fossil fuel production and use destroys the very ecosystems that sustain us. We cannot call ourselves conservationists if we look away from the single greatest threat to nature. Protecting wildlife, forests, and oceans while ignoring the impacts of coal, oil, and gas production is like trying to mop the floor while the tap is still running. But here is the awful truth. If we act, the benefits are enormous. A fair, fast, and funded phase out of coal, oil, and gas could cut the risk of extinction by 75%. It could halve the land lost to fire and flooding and almost eliminate the dead zones suffocating our rivers and oceans. Ending fossil fuels is not just climate action. It is biodiversity conservation at its most crucial. That is why we need a fossil fuel treaty. None of the existing climate agreements call on governments to act on what we all know must be done. Stop digging, stop drilling, and stop burning fossil fuels, which is 80% of the cause of climate change. A fossil fuel treaty will close that gap and provide a framework to phase out fossil fuels fairly while supporting workers and communities in building a renewable future. This is where the IUCN comes in. By passing Motion 42, IUCN will be the first major environmental body to put fossil fuel supply front and center on the conservation agenda. This is about science, justice, and ensuring our collective survival. It is the leadership needed to set new norms, to shift what the world thinks is possible, and to inspire governments to follow. Please, I beseech you, support IUCN Motion 42 and vote yes to a fossil fuel treaty for nature. Muchas gracias, merci beaucoup, obrigado, sheshe, placebo, shukran. Thank you for your kind attention. Asante sana.
Yeah, as Kumi shared, this proposal is so necessary to address the urgent harms caused by climate change and by fossil fuels, and the harms that are happening to so many communities around the world, which is why we're so grateful for the support of organizations like WWF, but also the network of organizations that are supporting the fossil fuel treaty proposal are quite expansive. As Harjeet mentioned, we have a variety of different types of stakeholder groups and constituencies, from academics to faith leaders to youth from around the world who are supporting this motion. And we are so grateful for all of the different organizations that are helping us to advance the vision of a just transition away from fossil fuels and a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty in order to help bring that vision into reality. And so with that, we wanted to leave some time for some of the other motions co-sponsors to share a little bit about why their organizations support the fossil fuel treaty proposal and specifically Motion 42 happening at IUCN. So with that, I would like to invite, Zach Romo, if you would like to come on and share.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, dear friends, I speak on behalf of COICA's technical team. COICA is the coordinator body of indigenous peoples organization of the Amazon Basin. To explain why we strongly support the fossil fuel treaty motion at this Congress. The Amazon is our home and a global treasure. It is home of roughly 10% of all known species and stores around 150 billion tons of carbon in its forests. The fate of the Amazon directly shapes the world's biodiversity and climate. For generations, indigenous peoples have safeguarded the Amazon rich ecosystems, yet today our rainforest is under threat. Oil drilling and other fossil fuel projects are carving up the Amazon and having a devastating impact on indigenous lives and on global climate stability. In 2023 alone, more than 1.3 million hectares of Amazon forest were lost, much of it due to extractive activities. In oil exploitation zone, communities face water contamination, forced displacement, and lost livelihoods. We have even seen how fossil fuel extraction is often linked to conflict and human rights abuses against indigenous peoples. Beyond the immediate destruction, burning these fuels is driving climate change that hits our peoples disproportionately hard. Recently, the Amazon suffered its worst drop in a century, and massive wildfires scorched 218 million hectares. Although indigenous peoples communities have the smallest carbon footprint, and we are among those most disproportionately harmed by climate disasters. When the Amazon waters dry up and forests burn, our cultures and survival are in jeopardy. Indigenous leaders from across the Amazon gathered to declare that the Amazon is not a sacrifice zone and demand a fossil fuel-free future. In response, indigenous peoples are not standing by, they are leading. COICA and other Amazonian leaders held a historic assembly in Peru this year, declaring that the Amazon is not a sacrifice zone, but a territory of life, and that we have concrete proposals for a just transition and that respects indigenous rights. We continue to protect our forests, and we call the world to join us in moving away from fossil fuels. A just indigenous-led transition means new livelihoods that do not destroy nature and climate solutions that leave no one behind. Current international efforts focus on fossil fuels consumption and emissions, but neglect the supply side. There is still no global agreement to manage the phase-out of fossil fuel extraction. This is why COICA supports negotiating a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. Such a treaty would halt new fossil fuel projects and phase out coal, oil, and gas production in line with the 1.5 Celsius degree climate limit. Crucially, it would also ensure support for a just and equitable transition, providing financing, technology, and capacity to help developing countries, workers, communities shift to sustainable pathways. In short, this treaty is about keeping fossil fuels in the ground while investing in people and nature. COICA is particularly championing the Amazon as a fossil fuel non-proliferation zone. We have joined dozens of indigenous nationalities and civil society groups in urging Amazonian governments to declare the Amazon basin off limits to oil, gas, and coal extraction. This would set a historic precedent, protecting biodiversity, safeguarding indigenous rights, and tackling the climate crisis at once. Success in the Amazon can inspire other biodiversity hotspots around the world to become fossil fuel-free zones. We want the Amazon to lead by example in showing that leaving fossil fuels underground is not only possible, but beneficial for our communities and the planet. COICA believes this fossil fuel treaty is necessary to enable a just and equitable transition for all. We urge international community to seize this moment together by working through a binding plan to end the fossil fuel era. We can ensure that climate action leaves no one behind and honors the rights and wisdom of indigenous peoples. Let us choose a future where the Amazon thrives, where our children inherit a healthy planet, and where a just transition creates new opportunities for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zach, for sharing with us today. Yeah, as you mentioned, an Indigenous-led just transition is such a critical part of how we are going to move away from extractive systems that the fossil fuel industry have helped perpetuate in our world, and make sure that we can protect biodiversity and frontline communities, including the indigenous peoples all around the world. And so we are so grateful for COICA's support of this motion and for your continued leadership on fighting for a fossil-free Amazon and all of the work that you do. So really grateful for you for taking the time to speak with us today. And with that, I will turn to Kathy Lee from BirdLife, who will be sharing about her organization's support for this motion.
Thank you so much, Rachel and colleagues, for your fantastic work about this motion and all the cool work you do for the treaty initiative. I'm Kathy from BirdLife International, where I lead our global policy on climate and energy. And with IUCN, I'm also the deputy chair of its Climate Crisis Commission, which is chaired by Manuel Pogar-Vidal from WWF. And I'm dialing in here from the beautiful Slovakia. I just came back from the field earlier, witnessing how countries in this region reconcile energy transition with nature. And I spent the last 10 days or so in China at a ministry hosted event where BirdLife and IUCN co-hosted the energy event there, and we highlighted how IUCN has been consistently calling for fossil fuel phase out. If you read the IUCN position paper to COP29 and to COP28, and the one that is releasing in the past few days of IUCN's COP30 position paper, it has consistently calling for the phase out of fossil fuels, and also of course, we also in that event talked about why this motion is so critical. And as we all know, Congress only happens once every 4 years. It's once every 4-year opportunity. If we miss this chance, the next one will be 2029, which sounds forever away. So I really want to encourage people to take this opportunity in the next week and next 2 weeks when we meet in Abu Dhabi, and ahead of that, to really think about as whether you directly have a voting power as a member organization or a member state of IUCN, or you're an interested stakeholders. I definitely encourage all of us to join forces and make progress utilizing this truly historic opportunity. And thinking about UAE also hosted COP28, where we secured really breakthrough progress within negotiations and outside of negotiations on transitioning away from fossil fuels and of course tripling and doubling and all that. So I really think that going back to the UAE, I think we should utilize this opportunity to make great progress. And personally, and I've heard from so many IUCN stakeholders in the past few months, that so many people believe that this is one of, if not the most critical motion for this IUCN Congress. I think it's truly game-changing. And I remember Harjeet knows the story of how this idea about the motion first started. It's different stakeholders within IUCN, without naming their names. There are ones from within the IUCN Secretariat. There are ones from the governance side of IUCN, and there are members of IUCN coming together last summer over a few drinks and brainstorming what are the most important motions that could and should go through the next Congress. And people are like, right, we need to phase out fossil fuels and we need to call for the negotiation of the treaty initiative. So I absolutely think that there's the huge need for this motion, and there's huge support and momentum across IUCN constituents and across external constituents to make this happen. And I think having this opportunity of IUCN motions, if getting passed, becoming resolution, is a multilateral decision. I think that power is truly incredible. And from BirdLife side, energy is, of course, a top priority for us. We have partners that are national civil society NGOs in 119 countries, and many of them have been working with their governments or calling on their governments to phase out fossil fuels. And over 50 of them are IUCN members, and will be voting at the Congress. So we'd love other NGOs to also join us to make this happen. And our partners, many of them do great work on the ground, but also work at national level on the energy planning, and also, of course, internationally. We've just received a nomination from the government of Brazil to nominate a senior diplomat to become the chair of the UN Convention on Migratory Species Energy Task Force, which I personally coordinate, seconded from BirdLife. So I think it's really incredible seeing the momentum from not only NGOs, but also governments on phasing out fossil fuels, on the energy transition, and how that should reconcile with nature. And for the Climate Crisis Commission, we also led a council-sponsored motion on climate, energy, nature nexus, which will also be discussed at the members' assembly. So I think there's also brought momentum within our commission and the interest from members to say that as a commission, we really should play a role to support IUCN constituents and members to make this happen. So my ending message is from both BirdLife side and also from the Climate Crisis Commission. We really would love all IUCN members, whether you're a member organization or a member state, and other stakeholders to join us and many incredible stakeholders, whether it's the European Parliament or Vanuatu government and others, to support this motion. And for those of you who have a vote, please do count them wisely. So with that, Rachel, I'll pass it back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, Kathy, thank you so much for that intervention. And just to say again, thank you so much to Kathy Lee of BirdLife and Zach Romo of COICA for your continued leadership in the fossil fuel space broadly and on this motion. We're so grateful to be working with you on trying to, pass this really historic motion through IUCN and build the movement necessary to phase out fossil fuels in order to protect nature, protect biodiversity, and to protect all people on the planet. And you have very well teed up our next speaker. I'm going to invite Luca Cinotti from WWF to share a little bit more about how exactly we can all vote on this motion, some of the procedural things that we should all know as we head into the World Conservation Congress. So Luca, the floor is yours.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for inviting me. So just also, I saw there was some question in the Q&A box around co-sponsoring the motion. And just at this stage of the motion process, it's not anymore possible to be added as co-sponsor. But actually, there are many other ways that you can engage in this motion that are actually even more important than co-sponsoring it. The first one, there will be the actual negotiation on the motion that will start during the Congress in a contact group. Will be a fully virtual contact group this time. And so even if you are not attending in person, you can actually engage if you are an IUCN member and you are registered as a virtual participant to the Congress. So there you can really show your support to the motion, really contribute to make sure that he's evolving in the right direction toward the right level of ambition that we are discussing here. Then, of course, the other way that you can engage and support the motion during the Congress is really around mobilizing and discussing and engaging with other IUCN members during event, the Congress. There will be many events, many opportunity to engage with other members, and I think it's important to really increase the level of knowledge and understanding on this motion and to mobilize other members. And then last thing, of course, there will be the vote at the Assembly of Members. And this, of course, is something that only IUCN member can do. But also for the first time on that case as well, also virtual participant can vote. It may be a challenge because the vote will be live, so you will need to be connected in the right session to be able to vote, and there will be 1 hour window to vote on the motion and only 2 minutes for the vote on the amendment, so which will require to be online. And but you can also decide to delegate your proxy vote to somebody that will be in person at the Congress and that you entrust to vote as you wish on the motion. The important is really that as an IUCN member, you need to make sure that you set things to be able to vote. So you will need to make sure that your organization is accredited to the IUCN Congress, that you have selected an head of delegation. That should be a person that is registered to the Congress. And if you're not there in person, you can register as a virtual participant only for the assembly. It's actually free of charge. So everybody can really do that. And then once you have done all these steps, if you decide to delegate your vote to another organization, you can do that. I mean, IUCN provided all the detailed explanation and guidance on how the vote will work, but I mean, in a nutshell, this is how it will work. And of course, it's important to have a large majority of both government and government agency to support that, as well as the other group of IUCN member, which is composed by NGO and indigenous people and local community. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that information, Luca, on the procedures of IUCN. So with that, we are going to turn it over to Q&A. So please feel free to ask any questions. There are a few that have already been asked and answered in the Q&A feature on the webinar. So feel free to add a few others, or I did really quickly want to answer, to Luca's point, while subnational members of IUCN might not be able to join as a co-sponsor of the motion, voting in favor of the motion as subnational members is quite important. My best understanding is that the subnational governments are in the same house as the national governments. And so having a strong show of support in that house is quite critical in order for this motion to pass. And so in addition to joining a contact group in order to help negotiate the text of the motion, and in addition to voting in favor of the motion, if there are other subnational members of IUCN that you have strong relationships with, we would really encourage you to encourage a strong vote in favor of this motion amongst your caucus, and to encourage other subnational members to vote in favor of the motion as well. Okay. Any other questions? Please feel free to write them in the Q&A feature. Okay, well, if there are, please feel free to keep writing. But if there are no questions, I did just want to say that, so myself and Harjeet and our colleague Becca, who is on this call, along with Fernanda and many other members of the WWF team, will be in person in Abu Dhabi for the World Conservation Congress, and we would love to connect with you in order to chat more about how we can campaign for this motion on the ground, to share more about the fossil fuel treaty proposal broadly, and to hear about some of the work that you are doing. So I am going to put, yeah, Harjeet, go ahead and come in.
Yeah, you were already going to put somebody on spot, so good. I thought I'll use this time, and if I was also thinking of putting somebody on spot. I see Alex in the audience, so Alex, but also give you some time if you want to come in. Alex is the executive director of the Fossil Fuel Treaty Initiative. So if you would like to say a few words connecting with other multilateral processes, particularly the conference that we are now has been announced by Colombia. So please feel free, or any other comment. But I thought I'll use this time to underline the importance of this multilateral process, and especially at a time when we see so much of backtracking on climate action and a lot of doom and gloom all around us. In fact, this is exactly the time when we should strengthen all the multilateral processes so that we are able to respond to the challenge that we are seeing from one part of the world where many of our actions are being undermined by the political leadership. This resolution can actually send a very powerful message that how world is united, how we are moving forward, how we see fossil fuels as a threat, how we cannot continue to depend on the fossil-based economy, and there is a clear pathway to move towards renewable energy to protect climate as well as biodiversity. So for us, despite the current geopolitical situation, this is such an important process. That's why we are engaging with the IUCN process, with the CBD process, with again with the same vigor and energy we are going to COP30 and beyond. So it's really important, and we urge all the participants here and all the members of the IUCN to very actively engage. And it's time to take some very radical step, as Kathy and Fernanda and Zach and others have highlighted. This is such an important motion that that we are really trying to get it passed. I'll pass it back to Rachel.
Yeah, Alex, you should be able to come in if you would like to share a bit more about how this relates to other multilateral processes that the treaty team is focused on.
Thank you so much, and thank you all of the participants and panelists and those that came up with the idea of the motion and have been advancing it and building support behind it. The idea of a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty is an idea that is catching fire in a good way in the world. And it is an idea that belongs to no one organization or entity. It's something that people are taking up wherever they are. And I think that this IUCN motion is a great example of that, where organizations like WWF and BirdLife and COICA saw the opportunity to advance the call and are being joined by the other governments that are calling for the treaty to advance the motion. We saw the same thing with the European Parliament's adoption or with the World Health Organization's adoption, where it was committed activists that managed to secure those achievements. And I'm really excited to see how far we can go with this resolution at the Assembly. More broadly, the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, as Harjeet, I think, mentioned, has the support of 17 participating countries at the moment. And as an initiative, we're trying to work to engage more countries to engage in the discussions of preparing such a treaty. And last week, Colombia announced that it would intends to convene the first international conference on the phase out of fossil fuels in Colombia in April. And its intention is to invite as many governments that are actually committed to the fossil fuel phase out to attend. The purpose of the conference is not limited to the discussion of the treaty itself, but about these broader issues of what is constraining our capacity to realize a fair fossil fuel phase out, and what are the opportunities to accelerate it. And one item would be the treaty itself, but we hope that the resolution of the IUCN will build momentum for that, and that the Colombian government can also then take that into COP30 as it formally announces the details of the conference and begins to invite other nations to join. So once we have collectively succeeded in passing this motion at the IUCN, I think the next step will be going back to those governments that support it and ensuring that they join the first international conference on the phase out of fossil fuels. Thank you all for your work and good luck and much solidarity in all of your struggles.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alex, for sharing that. And yeah, we are so excited to see many of you so soon in Abu Dhabi, and really grateful for the support that has been expressed both by WWF and the co-sponsors of the motion on this call, but also folks in the chat. We are really grateful that you are as excited by the opportunity created by this motion as we are, and we're really looking forward to coordinating with you. I have in the chat put the text of the motion, the full list of the participating nations in the Fossil Fuel Treaty Initiative, and then I'm going to share my email right now. Please feel free to reach out to coordinate with us. We're going to be doing a lot of campaigning on the ground for this motion, and we'll be putting together a WhatsApp group that we can use to share announcements around the campaigning, including when the voting will go live for the motion for folks who are not there in person. And so we'll circulate that WhatsApp group, especially amongst members that are not going to be able to attend the World Conservation Congress in person. Lastly, before we close this out, I just wanted to share that in addition to the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Motion 42 that is being discussed at the World Conservation Congress, WWF also has a motion 32 protecting seamounts and other vulnerable marine ecosystems from destructive practices. They're also co-sponsoring motion 59 on plastics, two other really critical motions in the biodiversity space. And there's a lot of overlap between plastics and fossil fuels. And so really great that IUCN will be considering a motion on plastics as well during this Congress. And then the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative is also in support of motion on ecocide. I believe it's motion 61 on ecocide, which is attempting to create a legal code that would be able to help legally enforce the ruling of the ICJ advisory opinion that Harjeet mentioned earlier. And so their team will also be on the ground campaigning on that motion. So a lot of really great and really relevant overlapping initiatives are considering really critical and timely motions at IUCN this year. And so really, we look forward to working with you on motion 42, focusing on fossil fuel supply side fossil fuel supply side policies, but then also really grateful to be a part of a coalition of organizations that are fighting for really critical policies on so many fronts in order to secure a just transition away from fossil fuels and broader policies that can help protect biodiversity and future generations on this planet. Really grateful to all of you for taking this time to join this webinar. As I mentioned, my email is in the chat, so please feel free to reach out to coordinate on the ground. And if there's any questions that come up between now and Abu Dhabi that you didn't get a chance to ask and have answered during this webinar, please feel free to reach out to me and I will point you in the direction of those who can answer. And so with that, I want to thank Harjeet, Fernanda, Luca, Kathy, Zach, Alex, Becca, and all of the organizations and individuals that are helping bring this motion to IUCN and who are going to help make sure that it is successful in Abu Dhabi in just a few weeks. Thank you all for joining. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Speak soon.